And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, do not hold that against me. Serving all of Silicon Valley, but focusing really on southern Silicon Valley, sort of San Jose, south to Gilroy. So if I can help you out with any real estate needs in that general area, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com. And you don't even have to actually talk to me. I know how annoying it can be to talk to real estate agents. But if you'd like to get a free online estimate of the value of your home, or if you'd like to start a search for your next home, just go to soldbyrobert.com. Right there on the front page, above the fold, right there, ready for you to use it, are two tools. One to help you get that free online estimation of your home's value. The other to start your home search. Feel free to jump in. It actually took me a while to find a decent tool for that free home valuation. There are all kinds of them out there, and so many of them are so inaccurate. This one's pretty good. So feel free to check it out for yourself and see if you agree. If not, we can always chat and throw more details in there to get a better estimation. So we're gazing into the crystal ball this week. We are going to try to figure out how things are going, when things are going as it relates to the real estate world. It's interesting because if you go out there and you Google leading indicators of real estate decline or the real estate downturn or any of that kind of stuff, you tend to get articles that aren't really predictive. You know what I mean? In other words, when I ask about leading indicators, I'm thinking things that tell me I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way, right? If we use the analogy of a real estate downturn being a destination on the freeway, a leading indicator would be a sign that says 10 miles ahead, exit to real estate downturn. A leading indicator is not welcome to real estate downturn, right? Or you're already there. And so many of the criteria that you're going to see as conventional wisdom is that. It's suck it up, buttercup, you're already there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about actual predictive things, or at least things I consider to be predictive, things that I keep an eye on regularly to clue me in to bad things coming. And what are those things? Because some of the things we're going to talk about here, you're going to go, well, Robert, what the heck does that have to do with anything? Remember, real estate is a weird mix of psychology, right? What a seller believes their home is worth, what a buyer feels comfortable purchasing, whether or not they like or don't like. There's an awful lot of emotions thrown into the world of real estate, and that directly affects huge amounts of money-related things. So it makes it a complicated process. But then there is also the reality that it is also just an economics question. When you are under economic stress, what things do you do when you're under that stress that then affect other things in your life? Because we can draw conclusions, right? Well, if inflation goes up, that may tell you something specifically about inflation, but it also informs you about what's likely to happen in other areas. Are people going to travel more when gas costs $6.60 a gallon? Or are they going to travel less? When people see that soup costs 3 times more than it did a year ago, are they going to buy soup or are they going to buy something else? When you see interest rates for a home where they're at, are people going to go ahead and still shop for that $1.5 million home, or are they going to drop what they're looking for down to $1 million, or perhaps not look at all and stick with where they are? Right? So there's a understanding the real world implications of numbers and the stress that gets put on people's finances. Now, if we look at the conventional wisdom, and I'm picking the smartest of the conventional wisdom out there. When you do that search, what are the things that are going to tell you that a real estate downturn is coming? The first is rapidly rising inventory. Well, that would be a we're already there moment for me, right? We're seeing rapidly rising inventory right now. That is to one degree an indicator that we're kind of already there. So I guess we could call that sort of a predictive thing, simply because the next thing will be effects on prices. Fewer immediate sales is conventional wisdom, and that's just basically days on market. But I'll tell you what, once you actually have the days on market data, and it's telling you that now instead of it taking 7, 8, 9, 10, 16 days, you see it jumping to 20 and 30 days. Well, again, you're there, right? You're not predicting it. You're not taking actions today because you believe this is going to happen next week or next month. You're already there when those numbers happen. Sharp drop in the price of new listings. Yeah, but I'd also suggest that new listings are less impactful than existing listings and whether or not they're getting price reductions. That's a little bit more predictive. Because the bottom line is psychologically, sellers are the last ones to psychologically grab onto the idea that we cannot get for our house what we thought we can. For a lot of different reasons. It's not that they're thick or ignorant. Well, maybe they're ignorant in that they are simply not keeping a track of what's happening every day in real estate. Because who does? Who other than an idiot like me keeps track of what's going on in real estate every single day? You have bigger fish to fry in your life, right? Whatever your thing is you do in life, that's what you're doing every day, not what I do. So the reality is when you're sitting at that table with that real estate person and you want to list your home, the bad news is that there's a high probability of me diverting on the shiny thing with this following statement. So forgive me if I do it ahead of time. There's a very high probability that you are going to be told what you want to hear in that listing appointment. What seems to be the standard operating procedure for an awful lot of folks in the business is simply to get the signature on the listing agreement, which means feeling good about it, right? Well, you're going to feel good about it if you say, I think my house is worth $1.2 million. And that agent goes, you know what? I don't think it's unrealistic for us to potentially get that. Let's go ahead and put that number on the paper and let's sign it right now and get started. Right? Rather than, well, I can see where you would have that feeling, right? Given the market we've had over the last year. But here is the most recent data on comparable homes like yours and what's going on with pricing. And if we were to price at that price point, given your square footage, location, and the other features your home offers, we'd be the most expensive home on the market compared to others that are similar to yours, right? Rarely do agents have that conversation. Now, are there agents that do? Absolutely. Again, I've done entire shows just on this subject because it annoys me so deeply. But the reality is for an awful lot of you, you're going to get that overpromise, that overpromise with fingers crossed, hoping that because they'd love to get that amount, right? But they may or may not be able to do it. And frankly, their skills may not be up to snuff to even give you a chance of getting anywhere close to that amount of money. But again, I can feel it happening. I can feel the digression going. So let's just drop that where it is, and simply move forward with sellers. Sadly, will often be the last to know that the market has turned, that things are not what they need to be in order to support that list price, right? And that's one thing we cover in Coffee and Real Estate every month. By the way, Coffee and Real Estate this Saturday at 10 a.m. over at Facebook. So go over to Facebook and do a search on Whitelaw RE, all one word, or Robert Whitelaw or Rebel Broker. You can find me there, and you can find the live video page there. I'll actually put a link to it in the show notes for today's show so you're aware that it's happening. But it's an opportunity to review the real estate data for the previous month and talk about the latest real estate stuff. And I got to tell you, in terms of impactful, pivotal months, you would be hard-pressed to find a more fertile ground to have that discussion than right now. Things are hopping, and I think we could have a great conversation this Saturday relating to that. So please feel free to join me in that conversation, and we can chat more about it. And you can ask questions. That's the whole point. It's up on Facebook Live, but I've also set it up now so that it'll live stream also to LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, I think is even in there. I'm pretty sure there's another one, but I cannot remember what it is. Twitter is the other one that it'll live stream to. So feel free to join me because I think we could have a very interesting conversation, and I'd love to get an opportunity to hear your comments and questions in a format that allows other people to benefit from what you ask or what you say, right? And that's why it's live, so that we can all benefit from it at the same time. Okay. So there we are. I don't think those are leading indicators. I think particularly the seller one, it often takes a while. I think the first thing you look for isn't new listings with lower prices. You look for existing listings where prices are being reduced. And we've talked about that strategy before in past shows and in past Coffee and Real Estates, where a great thing to do is to go up on Realtor.com, go to your specified community, put in the parameters you're most interested in, and zoom in enough so that instead of the little red dots, you get the price and either nothing after the price or a red arrow or a green arrow. Red arrows mean price increases. Green arrows mean price decreases. And that is a great, literally, bird's eye view of what's happening with prices. A few months ago, if I went to Santa Clara County or I went to Morgan Hill or I went to Gilroy or San Jose or wherever, and I did this exercise, it was mostly red arrows. You know, maybe at the super high price point, you would see a green arrow where a price had been dropped. That has completely changed over the last couple of months to the point where I don't see red arrows anymore, almost anywhere. If you're an investor or if you live in Phoenix or you're looking to buy in Phoenix, Phoenix is a great example. It's one of my canary in the coal mine communities. It's nothing but green arrows. And in some cases, huge drops in listing price. And that's something else that I think we need to add to our list, the real list of leading indicators. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about some things that I think are leading indicators that are a little bit more broad in that they simply communicate to you that financial decisions that people would make before they would make real estate type decisions in terms of, wow, we're going to stop paying our mortgage or whatever. These things would tend to happen before that. It's about identifying stress in people's financial situations to figure out where we're going and when we're likely to see these things affecting decisions that would affect the real estate world, right? So let's go ahead and hit the first one. Car repossessions. Now this, and car prices in general, right? Right now, car prices are ridiculously bloated. I was reading an article talking about used car prices being 40% higher than normal from just a couple of years ago. The COVID scenario really threw a wrench into the works. It was mostly attributable to chip manufacturing inabilities to get chips shipped, to get that supply chain fully implemented. We are now seeing a couple of things happening in that world. We don't need to get into the super specifics because it's really not that important, but we are seeing the chip manufacturers catching up with demand right now. But we are also seeing chip manufacturers, both Intel and VSMC, who are huge chip manufacturers, building more facilities in the United States to handle future demand. Now, granted, those aren't going to be online probably for a year, but we're already catching up. And then once we've caught up, there will likely be no problems relating to chip supplies, right? Because we'll have a domestic source for them. That's sort of a long-term conversation. It may be interesting, but it doesn't really inform this particular discussion. But the reality is car repossessions are up 100% from the same time last year. In other words, at this point, we have already repossessed more cars in 2022 than we did in 2020. 2021. So repossessions are nuts, which means we are accumulating tons of cars. Now, and according to information that I've come across, what we're seeing is banks are actually holding off on putting all of these used cars onto the market because they don't want to burst this bubble. So they're trying to trickle them out. Now, does that sound at all familiar? It has an exact analog in the real estate world. Remember when we talked about the shadow inventory? We talked about the shadow inventory for years and years after the big downturn, where banks were holding on to repossessed properties and didn't let them all go. They wanted to sell them in big batches to larger organizations because they didn't want to impact the consumer market. One of the biggest mistakes ever made, by the way, in my opinion. and they had the government as co-conspirators in that one in terms of the government-owned properties that were being only sold in huge blocks. So no individual could really benefit from it. It was always about people who had millions and millions of dollars. I'm pretty sure that show's still in the archive, but it goes way back to like 2012, 2013. I think I brought it up quite a few times over the course of the years. But if you'd like to hear what I would have done instead, let's chat about it on this Saturday's Coffee and Real Estate, because I think my plan was awesome. Frankly, I'm confident my way would have worked out a heck of a lot better and would have benefited a lot more people and given us a more robust real estate market, frankly, and might have short-circuited the stupid large corporate holdings that we currently have in a whole lot of real estate. But anyway, different subject. We can chat about it on Saturday. All right, so car repossessions are at crazy high levels. I've got some details in here from an article from Barron's relating to car repossessions. But the other thing to keep in mind is they're trickling these cars out. And again, according to this other source that I read, and there's one from YouTube, actually. I'll give a shout out to, I forget the guy's name, but he calls him the homework guy. And he basically is someone who's very plugged into the car buying and selling world, who gives advice to people on how not to be taken advantage of by dealerships and et cetera. I'll include a link in the description as I promised before. But there are acres and acres of cars waiting to be sold that are being held back right now to prevent this flooding of the market with used cars. This is different than houses. You can close up a house for a year, even 2 years, and have relatively minor things that you may have to do to that home after it's been vacant for a long time. Sometimes there might be a plumbing issue or something like that. But typically, and this is after experience selling some of these kinds of houses to clients where we had to figure out what was going on after the fact, typically not a whole lot. And I think the longest vacant home I ever sold or helped someone buy was, I think it had been vacant for 5 years before we bought it. And surprisingly, nothing really happened. That doesn't happen with a car. You park a car somewhere for 5 years, there is going to be a lot to do with that car. You park a car for 6 months, and there's likely to be lots of things that you're going to have to do with that car. So they can't employ the same strategy as before. They can't leave these cars off the market forever. So 2 things here. One, the fact that they're being repossessed gives us insights into something is not right with folks' finances. If repossessions have doubled, there are things going on. There are stresses going on in people's economics that indicates there's a bigger issue we need to talk about that will likely infect other financial decisions these folks make. The second part of this question is, if you're looking for a car, don't buy it now. If you're looking for a brand spanking new car, I would wait till 2023. According to what I'm hearing, the chip manufacturers are catching up slowly, but by the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, they'll be there, and the supply of new cars should be just fine. If you're someone who doesn't dig buying new cars because you buy it, you drive it off the lot and it suddenly loses 5% of its value or 10% of its value the minute you do that, and you're more interested in a used car, again, continue to wait a little bit longer because these are definitely going to come out. And as sales are going through the floor, they're going to have to try to entice people to come back. And the only way that's going to happen is with prices, particularly since interest rates are crazy. And the used car market is one of those dramatically affected by interest rates where people simply decide, I'm not going to buy. It's even more volatile and even more reactive to that than the home buying sector. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, now in this article, they talk to a guy who has the perfect car dealer name. And I'm hoping this is a name he picked for himself later in life, because if his mom named him this, man, did she saddle him with a very clear career path right at birth. Lucky Lopez, who's been a car dealer for 20 years. And he bids on repossessed vehicles before they go to auction. He's noticed some common characteristics of the defaulted loans. This is an interesting one to note. Most of the loans are recently repossessed cars originated during the 2020 and 2021 periods, whereas origination dates are normally scattered because people fall on hard times at different times. Loan-to-value ratios, or the amount financed relative to the value of the vehicle, are around 140% versus a more normal 80%. So why do I care about that? I don't specifically care about the car part of it. What I care about is the amount of debt where someone had financed to the point where at the time they're holding that car, they owed 140% of that car's value. Right? So, and a lot of this apparently was the result of the stimulus that ended and these other types of things. And we talked about the stimulus and we talked about it feeding exactly this kind of a problem down the road. So I hate to do an I told you so, but here we are. I told you so. Those monthly incomes fell sometimes by half as pandemic stimulus programs stopped. So we care about this because we're at this point, it amazes me I'm having this exact same conversation again. Because for longtime listeners to the podcast, you know that one of the things that we put when we were in recovery mode, when we were still trying to recover from the real estate downturn, we were talking about debt profiles, right? Individual debt profiles and how that feeds decisions that get made in the real estate world. And this is an indicator of a debt profile that is toxic to good or beneficial decisions in other parts of your life, including real estate. And this can feed all kinds of things. It can feed, if you're a landlord and you are renting a single-family residential home, these are the kinds of decisions people make who rent from you, who find themselves now absolutely hosed and have to go back to apartment living. So we are, to bring this back to a real estate discussion, in a time like this, where people are seeing a financial contraction in their personal power, right? Where they've taken on 140% debt on a car. These are the folks who are going to have to move into something else. So I think it potentially points to a volatility among landlords if you are renting a home that is a step up from less desirable options, like apartments, right? Apartments tend to be the least desirable. I guess if we went one lower, it would be renting a room in a house would be one step lower. But no one likes living in an apartment. I hated living in an apartment when I was in college. Loved living in the difference between a single family residential living and an apartment was night and day in terms of just peace of mind and having a nice mellow living, right? So that's the first thing. That's the first thing that points out a issue for landlords who might have to deal with tenants who are going to downsize or at least down budget in their lives because of something like this. For those people who own a home who are in this scenario, who did all their math based on this life that they thought they were going to get a perpetual stimulus check, this is scary, right? Because it feeds the foreclosure beast. These folks got their cars repossessed, and we know that in many of these cases, the next thing they're going to stop paying is that mortgage, particularly if they do math and discover they owe more than the house is worth. There's an awful lot of folks who've bought extremely expensive real estate over the last year and a half to 2 years, putting down 3.5%. Previous shows, I talked about programs that were designed to have is equity just the sort of goal here? But scenarios where there was 0% down, 1% down programs, 2% down programs. We see any downturn in home values, and we're seeing it already, right? The fact that we're seeing list prices drop in many markets, that's an indicator that sales prices are going to go down. Home values are going to go down. Now, right now, they're only slowing in terms of increase in value, right? If the data I have for last month is I think we were 8% up from the same time last year. But we've been double digits up for an awful long time when compared to the same time last year. So the rate has slowed. And I'll have graphs and all that wonderful stuff when we do our live chat on Saturday. But at some point, we're approaching a 0% increase from the previous year, right? So I think these are all important parts of the equation to keep in mind. That for some of these things, some of these bigger problems, as folks see the value of their home now dip below what they owe, what did we see last time? We saw folks stop paying their mortgage payments. We saw some folks, there were examples of people buying a home in the same town, right? and closing escrow on that one before they just simply abandon making mortgage payments on the previous home. Now, granted, interest rates were a different story then, although interest rates were high leading up to the downturn. Afterwards, they went down. So I'm not sure we'll see that dynamic, but the dynamic that feeds the beast is the stop paying of mortgages, the increase in foreclosures, which will also feed a dramatic increase in the number of homes that get listed, not because of choice, but because of necessity, right? As we see, again, it's about the debt profile of the individuals. And at some point, we can't support living in this house anymore. We have to get out of here. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing that we need to look at is pre-foreclosures. And for that one, we're going to return to one of my favorite sources, and that is ATTOM data. They are awesome at doing this data, and they have an article they put out on June 14th talking about foreclosure activity increasing in May of 2022. I cannot wait to see what their data is for June. That should be coming out any day now. I would guess it would be probably this week. So we could probably talk about this again during Coffee and Real Estate on Saturday morning. If you decide to join us, we could talk about foreclosure activity. But let's run this down because these are some of this is some scary numbers in terms of what's going on with pre-foreclosures. And pre-foreclosures are simply you missed a payment and the bank has told you, right? Or the process is beginning. Paperwork is being generated relating to foreclosing on your property. Now, they released their 2022 foreclosure market report on June 14th, as I said. There were a total of 30,881 U.S. properties with foreclosure filings, which are default notices, scheduled auctions, or bank repossessions. Now, that's up 1% from a month ago. So from April to May, it's up 1%, so no stress there. However, it's up 185% from the same time last year. So between May of 2021 and 2022, notices of foreclosure filings increased 185%. It gets worse. Because remember, that's just the U.S. Let's get a little regional. Illinois, New Jersey, and Delaware had the highest foreclosure rates. Nationwide, 1 in every 4,549 housing units had a foreclosure filing in May of 2022. States with the highest rates were Illinois, 1 in every 2,000, New Jersey, 1 in every 2,346, Delaware, 1 in every 2,426, and Ohio, 1 in every 2,667 housing units. And Florida, which this was a little bit of a surprise for me since Florida is seen as a booming market, at least in the popular headlines, 1 in every 2,788 housing units. Now, I think some of this may also come from, just a decline. There's bad things happening in some of these markets. I mean, where we've got Chicago. I mean, we've got some major players here that we can say, yes, that makes sense to me. But one thing that I think is potentially true of Florida is there was so many bloated prices in different markets. Prices went up so quickly in some of these markets that when things started to slow down a little bit, these may have hit that. I'd love to get more info on that and figure that out, but that's sort of my hot take on it, just right as we see things starting out here. Now, among the 223 metropolitan statistical areas with a population of at least 200,000, those with the highest foreclosure rates in May were Jacksonville, North Carolina, 1 in every 1,052 housing units with a foreclosure filing. Cleveland, Ohio, 1 in every 1,389. And this is obviously what I mentioned a moment ago, which no doubt in my mind. Chicago, Illinois, 1 in every 1,777 housing units. Fayetteville, North Carolina, 1 in every 1,823. And Rockford, Illinois, 1 in every 1,861. Those metropolitan areas with the population greater than 1 million with the worst foreclosure rates in May included Cleveland, Ohio, Chicago, Illinois, were Jacksonville, Florida, 1 in every 2,000 housing units, Orlando, Florida, 1 in every 2,300, and Miami, Florida, 1 in every 2,432. And the Miami one doesn't surprise me. I mean, I talk to some folks in Miami every now and again about the market. There was a lot of bloat going on in Miami, so I have a hunch that may be a side effect of that. Now, here's where things get interesting for us. Now, obviously, I'm a real estate broker in California. I deal 100% with, in terms of actual hands-on real estate business, California folks. I do have conversations with folks in other states in terms of broader real estate questions. I obviously can't answer questions relating to real estate laws or practices in other states. But in terms of just generic negotiation types of things and I'll frequently chat with folks in other states. But Florida, California, and Texas had the greatest number of foreclosure starts. Lenders started foreclosure process on 22,099 U.S. properties in May 22, down 1% from last month. And these are in these areas, Florida, California, and Texas, but up 1% from last month, but up 274% from a year ago. That's right, 274% from a year ago. States that had the greatest number of foreclosure starts in May included Florida, 2,483 foreclosure starts, California, 2,238 foreclosure starts, Texas, 2,019 foreclosure starts, Illinois, 1,757, and Ohio, 1,285. Those major metropolitan areas with a population greater than 1 million that had at least 100 foreclosure starts in May 2022 and saw increases from the last month included Miami, Washington, D.C., Birmingham, Alabama, Cincinnati, Ohio, and Jacksonville, Florida. Foreclosure completion numbers, meaning a foreclosure happened, increased 1% from last month. Lenders repossessed just over 2,800 properties through completed foreclosures in May of 2022, up 1% from last month and up 117% from last year. States that had the greatest number of REOs, meaning it's done, that person no longer owns the house, the bank owns it, included Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Ohio. Those major metropolitan statistical areas with a population greater than 1 million that saw the greatest number of REOs in May included Chicago, New York, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. I don't think any of those cities would surprise anyone. New York may be interesting because now we're not talking about the state of New York. We're talking about the city of New York. But the fact that Chicago is on that list, Detroit is on that list, Philadelphia is on that list, Pittsburgh, I'm not super up to date on what's going on in Pittsburgh, but those cities don't surprise me at all. So here we are, where we're seeing dramatic increases in starts, dramatic increases, because remember, we've had in the past moments where the process started, but it never completed. For the vast, vast majority of folks, it got ironed out before it got to the point where it got auctioned off or got repossessed by the bank. This is a dramatic change. The amount of increase we're seeing from the same time last year in terms of properties that have now gone through the process and the bank now owns it again is nuts. So these are the indicators that I think tell us about what's coming, what's around the corner. If we're staring into that crystal ball, these are the things that look back at us, and the data we are seeing absolutely tells me we are heading into a different real estate market than we've been used to. And if we're looking for a pivot point, I think we have seen a pivot point already occur. I think last month, if you want to go back and look at a replay of last month's Coffee and Real Estate, we chatted about that then. I think that's worth your time. I think we saw a pretty big pivot point last month. And I think like that first cranking on a bolt that stuck, maybe that was last month. But once it really gives and it just goes, I think this month has a lot of that in it in terms of the differences we're seeing. Whether we want to talk about inventory being up 100% in June in Morgan Hill. Inventory up 100% from the same time last year. All very interesting stuff. And data we're going to talk about, again, this Saturday for Coffee and Real Estate, so feel free to join me. So that lays the ground. The next thing is what I talked about sort of at the top, asking price reductions. And that's already well in place. As I said, I subscribe to a lot of different things that I consider indicators. a lot of different markets. So I've been looking at Boise. Boise is a community I added because I felt like Boise was one of those bloated markets. I think it went up much higher than it should have. And I've been watching that one. Huge reductions in prices there to the tune of, in some markets, as much as $150,000 to $200,000 reductions in some markets in Boise. And I think one of the most bloated sections of the market in Boise is the high-end market. So once you get over $1 million, I think you're talking about some pretty crazy bloated amounts in that market. The next one that's always been on my list is Phoenix and the greater Phoenix area, because that's always been one where when you start to see things happening there, they tend to be leading indicators of what we're going to start to see if the same trends continue right here in California and in our markets. Las Vegas is one I used to check. I don't do it as much just because it's such a relatively unique market since it's based so much on tourism. But I do still look at it because if you see things declining in Vegas, that should indicate to you that people are wanting to spend less money on that kind of stuff. They're tightening the belt. So it's not so much telling you about Vegas, right? The important data to pull from that isn't, well, things are happening in Vegas. It is people are deciding not to spend money on that stuff. When you get data that I get in my inbox monthly about hotel vacancy capacity data coming from places like Vegas, that is an indicator of people are trimming financially from doing certain things, one of them being not required travel to Las Vegas. And who travels to Las Vegas on a required thing? Sure, there's absolutely conventions and things that happen in Vegas that end up being a business thing. But if you're talking about discretionary vacation spending, when I start to see that hit Vegas, which we are seeing, it feeds, again, the debt profile. The debt profile is what I think is most important now. And finally, one thing I think that we should all keep in mind, and this is something, again, I know I keep saying this. If you've been watching the Coffee and Real Estate, you know that I have been zooming right past days on market data. I have been pushing it to the side because it was relatively unimportant. Because none of the days on market data was defined by the actual market. It was defined by real estate agents saying, I'm not going to accept any offers on this place until such and such a date. And then they would accept all the offers on that date, or they would review all the offers on that date, and they would accept one. That was the way it worked. You had to hold buyers back. You had to say, whoa, I want at least 2 weekends of potential open houses or 2 weekends of folks being able to visit the property and really garner the excitement before I accept an offer. Now, I take a quick look at every single listing that gets submitted in my town of Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and there's an awful lot that happen in San Jose, but a good chunk of the ones that come up in San Jose. So I'll review the notes to the agents, the other agents in the marketplace. And this don't submit offers till a certain date stuff has really fallen off of a cliff. Now it's we'll consider offers as they come is more common. Still, this is also a moment where choosing the right agent is super important because you can't simply rely on the momentum of an overall market to get you what you want and need in today's market, right? Right now, you need folks who are skilled at doing things that are going to give you an edge in your ability to acquire that property or get that property sold, get more eyeballs on your property. So, buyers, sellers, and investors, what are things you should be thinking right now? Buyers, I need you, if you are interested in buying soon and you don't yet have a real estate agent, be super serious about your search for a real estate agent. They can make a huge difference in your level of success, about holding back costs, being more aggressive on offers, being creative. I think the creative people in the market, right? Whenever, there's an old movie I remember watching. I can't remember what it was called. It was a submarine movie. Operation Petticoat, I think was the name of it. The submarine gets painted pink at some point. And one of the characters is one of these scrounger kinds of guys where he finds opportunity. And he says, in chaos, there is profit. And I actually think that's a Sun Tzu thing. But I like quoting it from that movie because it's, I don't know. I think that's funny. But anyway, in chaos, there is profit. But there's only if you keep your head on straight and you get creative. So all of these things, these crazy things that are changing in the market, look for the person who's got that tendency to be creative in how they approach things. Whether it's the buyers or sellers out there, the partner you choose, I think, is even more important now than ever. And what we're going to see next is the rats leaving the ship. We're going to suddenly see a decrease in the number of real estate agents that are out there, right? As things tighten up and it becomes more difficult and you can't just breeze your way through and let the market carry you, you're going to see more agents sort of, I think, evaporate into the shadows, which I think is a good thing for the industry. So you need to be careful about who you choose. For my buyers, you need to get some active searches going so you can see what's going on and get a daily update on what you're looking for in terms of your search. But every week, sort of try to get that 10,000-foot view and see how things are moving. How much are prices being reduced? Are homes that are coming on the market now tending to reflect lower expectations on the part of sellers? Once we start to see that, and also pay attention to the days on market of properties that you're looking at. As we get to a certain point, and this goes back when it was a buyer's market before, once you get to about 20 to 30 days on the market without a home selling, sellers mentally have now recalibrated to, wow, maybe I can't stick to my list price and have any hope of getting it. So suddenly you're going to have proof from the market that home isn't going to sell for what the listing price is. So take advantage of that. Go in there and do some negotiating, submit lower prices, be aggressive, but also be willing to be patient. I think we are on the cusp of this change. Running out and doing it right now may not yield the best results, but I think you're going to see as we head into winter of this year and then the season starting next year for my buyers out there, I think that if you right now, even though you may not be thinking, let's pretend right now you don't plan on buying for a year or 6 months or 8 months or whatever. Get those searches running now. Get mentally calibrated to where the numbers are going for the kinds of homes you like and find out where things are changing. Get a subscription to a market analysis for a city or area you're interested in that's normally intended for sellers. Now, I've got stuff like that. There's a site that I use called Area Pulse to generate that just does a 30-day review from wherever you look at it, right? So it's not here's last month. It is here's the last 30 days from today, from right now, data on your local marketplace. And I'm happy to set that up for you. I've set it up for folks in a lot of far-flung areas of California. Not sure if it works outside California, but happy to set up. In fact, I'm pretty sure it doesn't work outside California, but I'm happy to give it a try for anybody who is interested in getting that kind of information or access to that. So all you'd need is a URL, because I can set up the report and then you just go to that URL when you feel like it. And again, it'll just give you that 30-day review. I suggest the same thing for my sellers, but I think there needs to be a higher sense of urgency on the part of sellers. I don't have any question that we are in a moment of transition in the marketplace. And if you are seeing a peak price for your home, I believe that you may want to take advantage of that now. If you plan on staying for a few years, this is likely to be a replay of last time where perhaps we see a flattening or a decline for a period of time that then shows a recovery. So if you're in it for the long haul and you feel good about everything, don't panic, right? I still think it's good for you to keep yourself educated on what's going on in your local market and what your home's value is from time to time. I think that's valuable stuff for you to do, but perhaps no sense of urgency. But if you are someone who is looking at retiring, you might want to get creative. You might want to say, well, you know what? I after doing your own due diligence, right? Because this is all just me sharing my thoughts. This isn't financial advice. This is just me kind of throwing how I see things out there and giving you something to think about. If you decide it makes sense for you, a strategy could be sell your home, hold on to that cash for a period of time and ride things out a little longer. Or if you're looking at relocating to a different market where homes are less expensive anyway, now may be the time to do that and go ahead and get that secured so that you're getting the maximum amount on this end. Because typically, more actual cash gets lost when you're going from a more expensive market to a less expensive market. In other words, whatever amount of actual dollars a property in a lower cost area is going to go down is going to be less than what it would go down if you're in that higher priced market, right? And that's just a percentage thing. If two areas go down 10% and the average price in market A is $1 million and the average price in market B is 600,000, and they both go down 10%, obviously the more expensive home has a higher actual dollar drop, right? So leverage that reality. And for you investors, start looking for the creativity there. I think for anyone who is either a beginning or a seasoned investor, I think duplexes are a great way to go. I think we may see a softening in some single-family residential rentings in some markets simply because of the financial stresses I mentioned at the top of the show. But I think if you can get duplexes that feel very much like single-family residential homes or tris or quads, if you can find those kinds of properties, I think those represent a good opportunity because I see rents staying relatively stable. I don't think we'll see them decline. If I think back to the worst times when things were really bad during the last downturn, rents really tended to stay flat. They didn't tend to go down. We had some weird things happen in San Francisco, but in terms of San Jose, Morgan Hill, Gilroy actually saw a little bit of a downturn in rental prices. But in Morgan Hill and San Jose, for instance, they tended to stay flat. We didn't see rents going down. There's always yearly fluctuations, right? As more people tend to move in the middle of the year than during wintertime. But overall, everything was pretty stable for landlords. And I think that that's a good potential investment for folks. And I always have thought that duplexes are just a great way to do things because you're doubling your rent you're getting. If there's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath on one side and a 3-bedroom, 2-bath on the other side, you're going to be able to charge the same rent for both sides. But buying that duplex isn't going to cost you twice as much as in other words, if one house that's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths in that neighborhood costs $1 million, a duplex that offers that in that neighborhood is not going to cost $2 million. It's going to cost probably 1.2, 1.3, something in that neighborhood. So in other words, the amount of money you're going to make off of the investment is improved. So in comparison to doing a single family residential scenario. Okay. I think that covers it. Super interesting data coming out of this stuff. I'm really kind of stunned. There's also an article that I actually didn't even cover from SoFi that the 50 states in foreclosures, the lowest foreclosures are in Montana, South Dakota, Vermont, and North Dakota and Kansas. The highest foreclosures are in Illinois, New Jersey, Delaware, Ohio, Florida, South Carolina, Maryland, North Carolina, Connecticut, and Indiana, and then Michigan is 11th. Where's California? California is number 17 on this list. So not horrible, but the counties with the most foreclosures per housing unit from highest to lowest were Lake County, Trinity County, Plumas County, Kern County, and San Bernardino County. If you're someone who's in California and you're in these areas and you'd prefer to have your investments be in California, this kind of stuff potentially spells an opportunity for you. So I would take a look at those areas. Kern County is up here north of Sacramento. San Bernardino is in the south. Lake and Trinity and Plumas, I believe, are also Lake and I don't know where Plumas and Trinity are, but I think Lake is north of here. But in any event, opportunities are potentially presenting themselves in those areas as we see higher stress in those markets. And the last podcast I did was talking about the most at-risk areas, and Central California is one of the ones at the top of the list in terms of likely having issues with these kinds of problems for the market. All right, folks, as always, the goal is to leave you with more knowledge on the table than I take up in your time. I hope we've accomplished that. Thanks again for listening. I hope some of you will join me this Saturday, the 16th at 10 a.m. Pacific time to partake in coffee and real estate. I've made some interesting coffee choices lately, so we'll discuss those as well. But in any event, hopefully you can join me. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to you all next time.